Alright, so tonight we're going to discuss a few more concepts, and we're going to be getting into the olamot, the various planes, dimensions, worlds, whatever you want to call it, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created. But before we begin with that, I'm going to go back a little bit to some of the concepts that I mentioned in the last 2 weeks, which are important for us to see how it all fits in, how it all ties in. We spoke about a light, even though it's not a physical light, but that's how the Kabbalah describes the Ein Sof, the essence of God as a light permeating the entire universe. It's Ein Sof, it's unlimited. This world, however, as we know it, has dimensions. It's physical, it's not permanent, it's not eternal, because anything that's physical is not made to last forever. It falls apart, just like the human being. So we're taking something which is infinite and somehow creating something which is finite. How does that happen? The Or Ein Sof is representative of Chesed. It's the ultimate good. It's perfect. Tzimtzum, that we spoke about, is the first step that Hashem takes to limit that light. Alright? After that is accomplished, there is a kav, or a ray of light, that is introduced to create this world through a system of filters, as we call it, of the Sefirot. So we have the Or being Chesed, the Tzimtzum being Din or Gvura, because it limits, it restricts. This Kav, this new ray that is reintroduced back into the vacuum that was created, is Tiferet, because it balances everything out. In the same way that there is Chesed, Din, and Tiferet, or Rachamim, in the creation of the world, it is also seen in other aspects. For example, Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. They are our forefathers. And what do they represent? Abraham represents Chesed, Midat HaChesed. He excelled in that Midah. That Midah was very important during that time. And it will be important right before Mashiach comes. As the rabbis tell us, we will seal the Galut, we will seal the 6,000 years of this world with Chesed as well. Abraham is therefore representative of Chesed. Yitzhak is representative of Gevurah or Din, the Avodah of Hashem. And Yaakov is Tiferet. Rabbis tell us, Shlosha Dvarim ha'olam omed. Al Torah, al Avodah, al Gemilut Hasadim. Same idea. You have 3 pillars the world stands on, the world needs them, and they are Torah, Avodah, and Gemilut Hasadim. Gemilut Hasadim is Chesed. Torah is the Tiferet, and Avodah is the Din, is the Geburot. 3 ideas that are seen in all of creation. Speaking about the Tzimtzum, we spoke about how it restricts and how it was necessary. In order to create the Kelim, the recipients of this light, Tzimtzum needed to happen. However, according to the Kabbalah, the sod behind the Tzimtzum, what is the whole concept of restricting a light, it's not only to create vessels, but it's something called Hastarat Or. When Hashem made the Tzimtzum, what in fact was happening was he was concealing a bit of his light. And that concealment of the light becomes even more concealed as that light comes down to the lower worlds. The concealment is an act that is necessary to allow for Bechira Chofshit, for free will. If we would see Hashem very clearly, things would be obvious to us, then there wouldn't be free will. Then we would do what He expects of us to do. In order for the system to work right, Hashem wants us to give us the good. He wants to reward us. He wants us to work for it. There has to be free will. So the Sod HaTzimtzum, the idea behind Tzimtzum, involves Hastarat Ha'or, concealment of the light, which happens initially, in the very beginning, through the creation of that vacuum. But as it goes down, as that light scatters and goes down into this world, the lower it goes, the more it is concealed, the less it becomes obvious. The Malachim, for example, in the upper worlds, are more aware of Hashem. The lower you go, or the more Tum'ah there is, then for sure, the more that light is concealed. What happened after that Tzimtzum? We spoke about a vacuum, and we spoke about a kav. now just a few more details about what happened at that stage. When the light was removed, the initial light removed, it left behind something called the Reshimu. The best way to understand the Reshimu is, I think, Rabbi Ginsburg gives a nice example. Yitzhak Ginsburg is, imagine pouring yourself a cup of wine, emptying the bottle. What is left in the bottle? Some fragrance. Some of the aroma of the wine is still left in the bottle. Reshimu, therefore, is Eroshem. In other words, there is an imprint left. It's not the real thing, it's not the whole thing, but there's an imprint, there's a Roshem, the Reshimu of the light that was left. That is the Reshimu of the light of the Ein Sof that was left when HaKadosh Baruch Hu made the Tzimtzum. With this idea of the Reshimu, I explain why is it that a baby in its mother's womb is taught the whole Torah, and right before it comes to this world, an angel comes and slaps it on the face and makes it forget all the Torah that it learned. You must have heard about this, right? Why teach him the Torah if he's going to forget it anyway? But what happens after the Torah has been forgotten? There is a Reshimu left over. Nevertheless, something is there. And the way I explain it is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants him to have the vessels to grow. Because the Torah commands us, Kedoshim to you. You need to be a holy nation. Well, how will I have the tools? How will I do it? HaKadosh Baruch Hu prepares us while we are in the mother's womb by giving us the Torah, by creating that vessel, that Reshimu, that will enable us, it will make it easier for us to later capture it back by learning the Torah once again on our own. This Reshimu is also compared to Adam HaRishon before he received the Neshama. The Torah describes Adam HaRishon, the first man, before he receives the Neshama. What was he? Afar min ha'adama. It was just a piece of dirt. So the Reshimu, in the same way, it's something incomplete. It's something there in its initial shell. The vessel is being formed, but it's not formed yet. Then we spoke about the Kav. The Kav is that ray that comes back inside. This Kav has two dimensions to it. It has an inner dimension and an external dimension. The external dimension of this Kav, even though it's not physical, we have to call it a line, a ray. The external dimension is the power to create form. Everything in this world has form and shape because everything is finite. The external aspect of this Kav, that's what it does. That's the power behind it, to create form. And when you create form, what happens? You're able to distinguish between one entity and another. How is everybody here different? Because we look different. We have a different surah. Even though we're made of the same, we all have a neshama, we have a group, but there's actually a form, a shape. So that aspect of this kav allows for creation of form. The inner aspect of this kav is called a hut. It's called a string. What does a string do? It ties everything together. So that inner aspect of this kav ties everything in creation together, and it has the power of shikhpul. Shikhpul meaning of taking whatever is in the upper worlds and duplicating it exactly into the lower worlds. So you get an exact replica. As we will see, we have several worlds, several realms. Whatever is up there through this hut, through this kav, is replicated in its entirety. All of the sefirot come down from above to the bottom in the exact same form. Now, before we describe the worlds, I just want to remind you that there are quite a few differences. They are different worlds, they have different names, and many of the things, even though I said they are replicas, they appear differently. Quick example. In the upper worlds, which are more spiritual, we have something called din v'rachamim. Those are the actual sefirot, the actual anhagot, the actual emanations of Hashem, in the most spiritual sense possible. As you come down, everything is a replica, but the replica is not exactly the same, because as you come down, what happens? The world becomes more physical, mit'abeh, mitgashem, becomes more material, there's more matter, and therefore the midah of rachamim and din that you had upstairs, now it comes down, and what do you have? Instead of midot, you have actual angels of din and angels of Rachamim. You come down a little bit further, and what do you have? No more angels. You actually have the manifestations of Din and Rachamim. You have hurricanes. You have storms. Yeah, you have all sorts of dinim in this world. And you have Rachamim. You have Shepherd, you have good, and blessing, and so forth. So the manifestation of all that, even though it's all replicated, it becomes more physical as you go down to this world. Alright, so now we're going to speak about the worlds. There are 5 worlds. In Kabbalah you'll mostly hear about 4, because the first world is the initial world, or the initial realm that is created as a result of all this Tzimtzum. That's called Adam Kadmon. Adam Kadmon in English would be called the primordial man. Even though it's not a man, just a way of explaining that this is the beginning of everything. But what are all these realms? These realms are, I guess realms, I don't know if there's a better word for it, where you have the entire Hanhaga, the entire, all the Sefirot and Hanhagot of Hashem manifesting themselves in some form, in some way. And because they manifest themselves differently in the different olamot, that's why these olamot are called by different names, and because they serve different purposes as well. So let's begin with the first olam, Adam Kadmon. You have the initial realm of the initial world, which is the root, the shoresh of everything. This is the world of Sachar. This is where the Sachar, the whole idea of reward, is being prepared. Nothing happens there. All it is it's a world, it's a realm of the light of Hashem. That is where everything is conceived. Even though Hashem doesn't need to conceive, but we have to use physical terms that we can understand. That is where everything begins. And that is the will and desire of Hashem is there. And that is why that is called the Parzuf HaRishon, which gives expression to the lower worlds, beginning with the world called Atzilut. So we won't speak too much about this world because there's nothing that much going on in this world. We're more concerned about the bottom 4 that are somewhat more familiar to us. But before we get to these worlds, we have to understand a difficult concept in Kabbalah, a very difficult concept, that begins with Adam Kadmon. In the human being, there are hushim. There's a mouth, there's ears, right? There's eyes. What do? They tend to give out certain things, and in the human being, they also tend to receive. With the eyes, we're able to see. From the mouth, we're able to put something in, and we're able to expel something out. So in the human being, we can either expel, something can come out from these hushim, or we can receive. In Adam Kadmon, you have to imagine for a moment emanations of light. Light coming out. This is the light that's going to be coming down. This is the light that's going to form everything. So it's only coming out. But it's coming out from different parts of Adam Kadmon. It's coming from the eyes, from the nose, from the mouth. And as we will see later, even from the forehead and from the hair. There is no such a thing as hair and forehead and eyes in Adam Kadmon, but we need to use these descriptions to understand that they come from different parts, and for some reason, in the deeper learning of Kabbalah, it is possibly understood what the difference is. Why is this called the eyes? What does eyes represent? But we're not going to get into that. But there is light coming out from different aspects of Adam Kadmon. The light that comes out from the hair, which is on the skull, represents the Olam HaNetzach. It represents the light that will generate the eternity. Which world are we talking about when we talk about Olam HaNetzach? The year 10,000 and later. I'm going to talk about 7, 8, 9 soon. But I'm starting from 10. Right now, we're 5764. Okay. This is talking about the year 10,000 and later. Olam HaNetzach, eternity. That's the light coming out from the hair. Then you have from the ears. From the ears you have 10 sefirot coming out, which represents the Olam HaSechar, the world of reward, where the Neshama will have the reward for fulfilling the mitzvot. That's between 8 and 9,000 years. In other words, the 9th millennia, is that what you call it in English? The Elef HaTeshi'i. Then you have from the nose, the light coming out from Advan Kadmon from the nose, representing the 8th millennia, meaning from the year 7000 to the year 8000. And then you have from the mouth coming out the lights that represent the 7th millennia, which in the Kabbalah and elsewhere is described as Olam Harev, a world which is destroyed. What does it mean, destroyed? It's not that the world will be destroyed like some people think, but it's the body that is destroyed. Olam HaShvi'i is called Olam HaMa'avar. That is after we finish the 6,000 years, which is Olam Hazeh, this is our world, Olam Hazeh, 6,000 years. After we finish that, we go into Olam HaMa'avar, which is the 7th millennia. This 1,000 years where the body ceases to exist. And there's only a neshama that will function. And then there's another 1,000 years, another 1,000 years, and there's eternity. We don't know too much about these worlds, or these stages. All we know is that they have something to do with the Sachar, or the Neshama, and eventually eternity. There will be a period of time called Yemot HaMashiach, which could happen tomorrow. When Mashiach comes, he rebuilds the Bet HaMikdash, Tchiyat HaMetim begins, the dead will rise, where the Guf and the Neshama will benefit. After all, the Guf, the body worked very hard to fulfill mitzvot. It will also be rewarded in the period called Yemot HaMashiach. But the real reward is for the Neshama, and that will happen after the year 6000. In other words, this Olam is done with, then the real Sachar begins then. So these are just lights, if we can call it that represent those worlds or that stage in the world. Besides these lights representing the different times and different stages in the world, they also they represent the root of different types of neshamot. The lights coming from the ears is representative of the root of the neshamot, that their tafkid will be to hear divinity. They will have that koach, they will pursue that ideal of hearing divinity, elokut. The lights coming from the nose represent the root of souls, that their tafkid, their role will be to serve Hashem. Doesn't mean that everybody else will not serve, but they will excel in that area of Avodat Hashem. The lights coming from the mouth is the root of the souls, whose job will be to teach others Torah. And the light coming from their eyes will be the souls that will show others the way of the Torah. Shelichei Hashem, the emissaries, the messengers of Hashem. This whole idea of root of souls, we may eventually talk a little bit more about it in depth, because it's a fascinating subject, because it tells you that even though we're all the same in a sense, we all have a neshama, there are different types of neshamot. And because of the differences, they all have a different role in this world, and they all need to do something else. These lights that are coming from the ear, from the nose, in the very beginning, were very weak lights comparatively, because they were just coming out, they were very weak, and therefore no vessels were formed. It's only with the beginning of the lights coming out from the mouth that vessels are formed, and the world that is formed, the world of vessels being formed here, is called Olam HaAkudim. You may not need to remember this, but in case you ever read something that says Olam HaAkudim, you will know you heard it once. Olam HaAkudim, the word Akudim means bound or tied, because what happens here is that finally the light is able to come down further, but there's only one big vessel to contain all of this light, and in this vessel nothing happens. There's a concept in Kabbalah called mati velo mati. It goes up, it goes down, it is not able to make any changes. And Rabbi Ginsburg, I think it's his description of this particular stage, is as follows. That this could be compared to I don't know if it's his description or another rabbi's description. Anyway, somebody gives the following description. Imagine a child, a baby. The only way it can express itself is by crying. It has no language. It has no other form of saying what it wants. Crying could mean a lot of things to it. Whether it wants water, whether it wants attention, whatever it wants, everything is a cry. So at this point, the Sefirot have no way to express themselves, and therefore they don't create anything. And there's only one vessel holding them all together. That's why it's called Olam HaAkudim. So far, what did we see? No major vessels are formed, but the eyes from the light from the eyes come down and form 10 kelim, 10 vessels, but these vessels are only dots. In other words, instead of being complete vessels, they're only minor dots, very weak vessels, and that's called Olam HaNekudim. Nekudim meaning dots. What happens in Olam HaNekudim? Because the vessels are only dots, you have 10, but they're only dots, they're very weak and they cannot contain all this light. And because they cannot contain all this light, this immense amount of light breaks the kelim. This is one of the most important concepts in Kabbalah that you'll ever learn, something called Shevirat Hakelim, the breaking of the vessel, or the shattering of the vessels. Vessels all of a sudden are shattered, they cannot contain all this light. And I'll tell you soon why this is a very important concept. What happens to vessels that are shattered? If they contain something, in every piece there's something of whatever was there in the beginning. What was there spilled out, but there's still in every piece a little bit of residue of what was there to begin with, right? This is how the Kabbalah explains how HaKadosh Baruch Hu made the Tum'ah, the Yetzer Hara, the Malach HaMavet, the angel of death, all the Ra, all that we call evil. It happened through this stage called Shevirat Hakelim. The vessels were broken, and it's through the broken vessels that have sigim, they have the poor quality of the vessels in them. It's not the better quality of the vessel. That is how the Sitra Hara, abbreviated Samach Aleph, was formed. This Sitra Hara, which by the way means the other side, contains an exact replica of the Kedusha. Zeh le'umat zeh. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the Kedusha, created all this light, all these Sefirot of his Hanhagot. He created in order for what? In order to strengthen this free will. He wants to have free will, right? That's why there is a Tzimtzum of the light, there's a Starat Panim. In order to make this work, he creates the Sitra Hara, which will be a continuous challenge to mankind to do the will of Hashem or to go against it. Right? The Yetzer Hara tells you to rebel against Hashem. And there's a whole bunch of cohorts, partners in this Sitra Hara. There's the Yetzer Hara. After the Yetzer Hara convinces you to do something, he's the Satan. He will accuse you upstairs. And after he accuses you, he's the Malach HaMavet. He will take you. Right? So they're all called Sitra Hara. There's Mazikim in the Sitra Hara. There's all sorts of Mashchitim, destructive angels. All this belongs to the Sitra Hara. In a sense. I mean, there is on the other side also different Malachim, but they have their own group of kohot, of various forces, that their responsibility is either to incite or somehow to get you into trouble. And all of this happens through that concept called Shevirat Hakelim. In the Kabbalah, that is why Olam HaNekudim, in HaNekudim, is called Olam HaTohu. When you read Bereshit, what does it say? Va'aretz hayta tohu vavohu. So according to the Kabbalah, that is referring to that the very beginning, all you had was Akudim and Nekudim. You had no order. Because the order in the Sefirot, Yetzivut. Yetzivut meaning not only order, but permanency. Only begins later on in Olam called Olam HaVrudim, which leads to Olam HaAtzilut, and to the lower worlds, which are called Olam HaAvodah, the world of work. So, speaking about this Sitra Hara, if you read the Torah, you will find a pasuk that says, Ele Malchei Edom, Asher Malchu Be'eretz Edom Lifnei Melech Melech L'Yisrael. These are the kings of Edom that ruled. And it lists the kings of Edom. What's the significance? You know, the Torah does not just write names of kings, and what does it have to do with anything? The Torah is a very abridged book. And if it writes an extra letter, there's a reason for it. But according to the Kabbalah, that has great significance. That in the very beginning, man failed. Not only did man fail, but the emissaries failed. Why are emissaries? Because we said before that the light coming from the eyes of Adam Kadmon is the root of what souls? The souls that are supposed to teach people. in the very, very beginning of creation there is failure in doing that particular job. And all of that is merumaz in that pasuk. Alright, so far what do we have? We have the shattering of the vessels, which I'll talk about a little bit more later on. Now, because everything is shattered, Hashem reintroduces a light that comes down from the metzach, from the forehead of Adam Kadmon, and this leads to what's called Olam HaTikun. Finally the world is metukan at one stage. Everything is in its place, everything is well organized, everything is perfect. That's Olam HaVrudim. And that shlemut you find in a place called Olam HaAtzilut. Before we talk about that, I want to remind you, some of you have heard the famous expression in Chazal, Shakarosh Baruch Hu boneh olamot umachrivan. He builds worlds and he destroys them. And because of this expression, a lot of people have approached me, Rabbi, maybe these dinosaurs are from worlds before. Maybe the world is millions of years old, because boneh olamot umachrivan, Hashem created worlds and destroyed worlds. If you look in the Zohar, you will find that that's not talking about physical worlds, it's talking about spiritual worlds. There were no other worlds, this is the only world. And it's only 5,764 years, not more. There's a question only about the 6 days of the first 6 days. Were they really 6 days of 24 hours? Or was each day 1,000 years? Okay, let's say there were 1,000 years. So how much do we have? 11,000? We don't have millions. You follow me? No matter what you say, you don't have millions of years. This Koach Hara that Kadosh Baruch Hu created has 4 levels. Level 1 is called Ruach Se'ara. Level 2 is called Anan Gadol. Level 3 is called Esh Mitlakachat. And the 4th level is called Noga. Just for your information, 4 descriptions of the Ra. In the 3 of them, the first 3 are always bad. The 4th one, Noga, or Klipat Noga as it is known, is sometimes good. This aspect of the Ra sometimes does good. It sometimes joins the Kedusha. But otherwise, Ra is Ra. Ra means bad. Now what happens, because of these Kohot Ra, what happens in this world of ours, which is called Olam HaTikun, because they exist in this world too, if we do a Maaseh Ra, if we commit a sin, we are giving them more rulership. We are strengthening them. And I spoke about this a little bit in the tape, in the lecture of Why Can't a Jew Marry a Non-Jew? One has no idea what he's doing. It seems to be a simple act, but marriage is a very powerful act. Damage that comes out from doing a Maaseh Ra, because we're giving strength to the Ra, we're giving them Shlita, we're giving them rulership. And when they have rulership, what happens? There's a Hester, there's even a greater Hester, there's less light. Why is there so much evil in the world? How could there be so much evil? How come the evil is so strong? How come they're getting away with it? But that is exactly what happens when there's so much Ra. It appears that they are shortim, that they have the rulership. And all the light is being pushed aside. On the other hand, if we do a Maaseh Tov, if we do a mitzvah, a good deed, that has the opposite effect, of weakening the Koach Hara and pushing it aside. Alright, so now that we saw the Ishtalshelut, how all these worlds are evolving, now we've reached the point of where there is a certain order in the world, and the first world to manifest itself with the proper order of the Sefirot and the Kelim is called Olam HaAtzilut. In this Olam, as I said, everything is metukan, everything is fixed, and the bottom worlds that will follow from this world is called Olam HaAvodah. And why is it called Olam HaAvodah? Because Am Yisrael, of all the nations, will be given the job of doing what? Of fixing. There were shattered vessels, there's something broken, there's something that needs to be fixed. Am Yisrael will be given that job to fix it. And how will they do it? They will have a special neshama. That special neshama will contain a part of this light that will enable it. It's a certain degree of divinity that will enable it to do this job. That's why only they can do it and no one else. That's why they need to do that. That's what we should have been doing until now. Mashiach would have come so many years ago had we done that, to repair this world. So the bottom world, the world beneath beneath Olam HaAtzilut is called Olam HaAvodah, because Olam HaAtzilut itself is fixed. Everything is fixed. There's nothing to do. The vessels were shattered. Hashem reintroduced the light coming down from the Netzach. Everything is formed. In Olam HaAtzilut contains everything in the right order. There's nothing to fix. That's the world that hopefully will be the world that we will live in after Mashiach, after the world is fixed. But the bottom worlds relate to us, relate to the avodah that we need to do to fix. Speaking about fixing, we all have something to contribute to this world. As we said, Letaken olam v'malchut shakai. We want to fix this world. We want to bring Hashem down, that He should rule over this world. Hashem melech al kol haaretz. That is a tikkun for the entire world. But there's also a tikkun atzmi. There's also something that we need to do to fix ourselves. A human being is not complete when he's born. One way to help complete oneself is through the zibug of zachar v'nekeva, which maybe we'll speak about next week or in 2 weeks. The combination of male and female. Why does Hashem make male and female? So we spoke about the fact that there's sets of twos that has a significance in this world. But the male and female aspect in a human being is completely the idea of hashlama. Shahad mashlim dashini. Each one complements and fills in where the other one is lacking. But that only happens on condition, as the Kabbalah says, when the two of them are panim el panim, when the two of them are facing each other, not when they're not facing each other. Meaning when they're working together. And the only way the two can work together is when the two of them have a certain level of maturity. When the two are beshalim. If one of them is not complete himself, he's not mature enough, then he will have a hard time being face to face with the other one. In other words, in order for there to be balance, it's called balance. In order for there to be balance in marriage, the two have to be facing face to face. In order for that to happen, they have to be mature. That is the idea of fixing oneself through one's marriage. But even though that happens through one's marriage, there has to be a certain level of maturity beforehand in order for that marriage to be successful. Alright, so we're now speaking about the various worlds. The world of Atzilut has no Nivraim. There's no creatures in that world. Only the Hanhagot of Hashem. Hashem's emanations, the Sefirot. The reason why it's called Atzilut, the world of emanation in English, because the word Etzel means close by. This is the closest world to Hashem in a sense. Everything is close to Him, but that is the first thing that is being formed close to Him. A world that is separating from Him. So it's Etzel. It's no, close to Him. Or Etzel could also mean Lehatzil, to emanate and to generate, because it's from this world that the bottom worlds are formed. The next world is Seraphim. The next world is Beri'ah. You have Atzilut, Beri'ah, Yetzirah, and Asiyah. Beri'ah meaning the world of creation. In this world you have Meshartei Elyon, you have those entities that serve Hashem, but there are various types of entities. The entities that exist in the Olam HaBeri'ah are called Seraphim. You may have seen it in the Tefillah. You have Seraphim, Ofanim, Bechayot HaKodesh. In Beri'ah you have Seraphim. That is the source of the Chokhmah that we have. The Chokhmah comes from the Beri'ah. That is where the Kiseh HaKavod of Hashem is. And that is where the root of the souls come from. The Mekor HaNeshamot in the Olam HaBeri'ah. That is why it's called Beri'ah, creation. That is where something begins to take shape. But the actual formation happens in Olam HaYetzirah, which is the world beneath it. That is where you actually have true entities. Yetzirah is the Olam HaMalachim. Even though I said that they were Meshartei Elyon, they were spiritual entities in Olam HaBeri'ah called Seraphim. The main Olam of the Malachim is the Olam HaYetzirah. Here you have the Malachim that you find here are Hayot HaKodesh. This is the Olam, this is the world that Yeshayahu and Yechezkel HaNavi, if you read some of the prophecies, they had Hizyonot, they had visions. The visions related to what they saw in this world, in Olam HaYetzirah. This is the world where you find the root or the source of emotion and love. What is that? Where did that come from? That needed to be created too. There's a root for that too. That is in the Olam HaYetzirah. And then you have the bottom world called Olam HaAsiyah. Even though it's it's the physical world. In this physical world that we call Olam Asiyah, there's also a lot of spiritual entities. You have Malachim here too, in this Olam called Asiyah. Which Malachim? The Ofanim. This is the world where the entities are more independently motivated to do things. They don't just do things automatically. This is the world of demons too. And in this world you have a physical part, a complete physical part that we know as the universe, the galaxy, the earth, the Milky Way, whatever you want to call it. This is all in Olam Asiyah, but it's the physical part of Olam Asiyah. And it's also known, the physical part is known also as Olam HaGalgalim, of all the planets and spheres. Where do you see that? Here. Even though it's in space, but it's all part of Olam Asiyah. The instinct to do the will of Hashem, to serve Hashem, is found in this world, in Olam Asiyah, because this is the Olam HaTikun. And since this is the Olam HaTikun that we're supposed to do what Hashem wants of us, the instinct exists over here. So we spoke briefly about the four Olamot. In the Kabbalah you will find that the four Olamot are also representative of the four letters of Hashem, Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey. And the first Olam, which is really the fifth Olam, Advan Katmon, is represented in the Kotzot Shel Yod, in the little crown of the Yud. These four are also representative of the four different aspects of the Neshama. In reality there is five. You have Yehidah, which is the highest one, which is in Olam HaKatmon, which is in Adam HaKatmon. You have, after Yehidah, you have Chaya, Neshama, Ruach, and Nefesh, which we'll speak about another time. The various parts of the Neshama that have something to do, or something that corresponds to these worlds. And last but not least, I want to speak about just for a few moments about why Hashem made it so that this Olam should be an Olam of Tikkun, that it should be the responsibility of mankind to fix what is broken. As we said before, the vessels were shattered. That made room for the creation of the Sitra Hara, which is the source of the Kohot Hara in this world, which enables man to have free will. But nevertheless, what for? Why does it have to happen through a breaking of vessels, and in return, as a result of the breaking of vessels, we are stuck in a sense with fixing what is broken? The only explanation that you will find is as follows. That is the decree of Hashem. Hashem decreed that man should be created in an imperfect state. And that is why we have an orla that has to be removed after 8 days. Something extra. What for? Why do we have to? Why can't Hashem make it perfect? Why does He ask of us, the Jewish people, to remove something? Make it perfect. Make it right from the start. To remind us, no, this is a Olam HaTikun. I'm giving you a mitzvah after 8 days old only, right in the very beginning, to remind you what you're here for. You're here to fix. You're here to repair. You are born in an imperfect state. I could have made you perfect. I could have made you complete. But this is what I want. This is the Gzerah Me'amoreh, that creation should be imperfect, and that should be the job of humanity. Hashem is giving us a job, and He chose that job should be to perfect, to correct, to complete. And since that's going to be our job, He has to make it imperfect. And that is the message of the Brit Milah, one of the ideas behind the Brit Milah. So, this world is therefore called Olam HaTikun because that is man's job, humanity's job, not just the Jewish people. The Jewish people have a more specific job, and what is that? Le'alot et kol hanitzot shel kedusha, all the sparks of holiness that are trapped in those shattered vessels. Because as we said before, the shattered vessels contain something. The light in them all went back. Most of it went back. All that it was there. But some of it remained. What remained is representative of this holy sparks that are all over the world that need to be elevated back to the Kedusha. They are being trapped right now in the Tum'ah. And that is one of the reasons why when Hashem sends us to Galut, He scatters us all over the world. So much so that wherever you go, you will either find Pepsi Cola or Chabad. Why? Because Hashem wanted it so, that there should be an ambassador, an emissary of Hashem everywhere in the world. So we should be a dugma, an example for everybody. So we have to be everywhere. That's one reason for Galut. The second reason why we're scattered is so they shouldn't be able to get us all in one place. So the Jews are scattered. If you get those who are there, there's still some more left there. And Galut, the ultimate idea of Galut, is a kapara. It's an atonement. Because Hashem wants us to remember that when we are sent in Galut because of our Maasim, the Shekhinah is also in Galut. The Shekhinah. We did not follow what Hashem wanted us to do. We did not obey His mitzvot. That causes the Raf to become powerful. That causes Galut to the Shekhinah. In the same way that there's Galut to the Shekhinah, that there's Galut to Am Yisrael, there's also something called Galut la Neshama. The Neshama goes to the Galut. When? When it has to come back in a reincarnation. For what reason? For its own tikkun. So ultimately, all these Galuyot are tikkunim. That is also perhaps what the Ishtalshalut teaches us. When the light is coming down from the upper world to the bottom world, what does that teach us? Where does it have to come down? Perhaps the idea behind the coming down is in the same way that something can come from above to below. In the same way, the human being is capable of taking that which is below and bringing it up. Physical body is physical, it's mebusham, but it can become more spiritual through the neshama by working on himself, by allowing the neshama to express itself. By doing the mitzvot, one is able to purify the body. That is why the great tzaddikim, their body has become so pure that they did not rot. Even after many years, they opened up the grave and they sounded completely fresh, exactly as though they would have been buried today, with their shrouds, with the beards and everything. And there are many stories like this of tzaddikim, of people, of individuals who were great people, great men. Chet Adam HaRishon is another example of Shevirat Hakelim, the sin of Adam HaRishon in the very beginning of creation. What he did caused a tremendous amount of damage and of imperfection in this world. And this is an example of what things will happen when we disobey the will of Hashem and follow the Etzah, the advice of the Nachash, which is representative of the Yetzer Hara. So that story has a lot of messages for us, for all of humanity, that incident repeats itself. That temptation, that challenge will continuously be the challenge of all mankind. To hear what Hashem says and not hear, not follow what the Yetzer is telling us to do. That is the ultimate challenge, because that is what amounts to free will. Alright, this world is 6,000 years, we said. But these 6,000 years are also divided. The first 2,000 years are called Tohu. The second 2,000 years are called Torah. And the last 2,000 years are called Yemot HaMashiach. The first 2,000 years are called Tohu because they are the initial 2,000 years when the world is just beginning and it's running on its own. It's running on its own based on the principles by which the world is created. Up until when? Up until the Torah is given. The next 2,000 years there is Torah. Once the Jewish people have the Torah, they're able to put a stop to the Tohu, to this lack of direction, if we can say, running on its own. Now it's not running on its own, it's running with the leadership and with the control of the Torah. There's order, there's direction. In the last 2,000 years there will be a combination of Tohu and Torah. Confusion on the one hand and Torah on the other hand. And that is why the Zohar says that a lot of the neshamot, the souls of Sdom ve'Amorah, of that generation, of the Mabul, will come back down. You will see people who are very, very engrossed in the Tum'ah. And you don't have to go too far to see these people. You will have a lot of darkness, but you will also have the Torah. Because the world will be reaching and will be getting closer to its final tikkun. So everything comes down and everything faces each other, the good and the bad. And the challenges therefore will be very difficult for somebody to stay on top when he has all these temptations from all this Ra facing him. Because this is the end of the Ra. The Ra is about to disappear. And therefore it struggles and struggles to overpower the good. So what about Gehenom? We didn't speak about Gehenom. Well, what did we say till now? We said that this is the world of Tikkun. Man is given a job to fix that which either he has done wrong, which is done through Teshuvah, or that which has happened before, through the breaking of the vessels, which is really the job of Am Yisrael more than anybody else. If man does not accomplish what he's supposed to do, on the contrary, he breaks more, he has to fix, he has to pay for it. One of the ways that happens is through Gehenom. Another this happens is through Gilgul of the Neshama, which we'll speak about another time. Is this bad or good? It's good, right? Because Tikkun, ultimately, he's being fixed. People do not understand it as that. They think Gehenom is terrible. Well, I just saw a beautiful Gematria. Gehenom has the same numerical value as Gamzu Letova. In other words, even Gehenom that Hashem created serves a good purpose. It's in the end we all gain from this. However, the best Tikkun is if we don't have to go through the Gehenom, if we're able to do Tikkun in this world. Okay, Bezat Hashem will continue next week. Yes. What is that? She too. Yeah. There's only a difference between he and she when it comes to Gilgulim. But there's no doubt that in this world the Tikkun depends on everyone. Men and women. Just that the men have a different role than women do. Just like Am Yisrael has a different